Alright, so now we're back. These videos can only be 15 minutes or less, so that's why we only had 13 minutes on the last one. Alright, so it's Oregon fever that hits the United States in 1845. If you look, this Oregon Trail, this was the wagon trail across the country. Excuse me. And by 1846, there were 5,000 people out there. So this dispute over the Oregon country, who was going to get it, the British or the Americans, it becomes an issue, as well as Texas. Texas becomes an issue. In the 1844 election. Remember, it was not a state until 1845, so it's a contentious point, because obviously, because of its geographic location, it pretty much is going in as a slave state. There were people living there already with slavery, so removing it would be almost impossible politically. All right, so you have Henry Clay and James Polk in the 1844 election. This is Henry Clay. He was very popular. People liked him. James Polk had been in the excuse me, a speaker of the House for 4 years. He had been governor of Tennessee for 2 terms. So they were both experienced politicians. Clay was from Kentucky and Polk from Tennessee. The campaign issue of the day was manifest destiny. This idea that the United States was destined by God to be to spread the empire of liberty across North America. This was the justification / rationalization for the mid-19th century expansionism, that people believed that this was God's plan. So sorry. Okay, excuse me. So people believed that God had ordained this spread, and there was even talk at times that the United States would spread into South America. Obviously, that was not financially feasible or politically possible. Defending and occupying that much space, just getting it at that point, by then South America was you had a series of independent countries, and so they had begun throwing out the Spanish by Simón Bolívar's time in the 1820s or so. So they were already, you had a bunch of independent countries in South America. It was not going to be feasible. So you have land greed and these ideals that were joined together. So freedom equals empire. So we can make land greed, which is what it was, pure greed. We can make it pretty by calling it liberty and how it's going to be great for everybody. Question is, do you see any of that going on today? Have we done that over and over in the name of spreading democracy throughout, the world? Consider Iraq, Middle East. Why do we think that these Middle Eastern countries, they don't necessarily want democracy, but we want them to have democracy, and so we think that spreading our ideals to their countries is the best plan. In fact, they might not want to have a democracy. Maybe they like the way it is. But also, if they have a democracy, then we can be better friends and we can have access to their oil. Just saying, that's the cynical side. But money and greed are joined with liberty at this point, and so and that in my mind continues today. So Polk's agenda, this Walker tariff. Well, now of course he's lowering the tariff rates from 32 to 25%, which means that it's going to be less expensive to import goods from other parts of the world. Northerners did not like it because it was, you remember, the tariffs protect the industry in the North from foreign competition. So if we slap a 32% tariff on the goods that are coming into this country, then that means that our industry is protected because people are not going to want to pay that extra 32% to buy the foreign made goods. Well, the Southerners loved it because they were exporting all their cotton, and so it made things better for them because they also were purchasing things from other countries, and it was a much better deal for them. The Brits, particularly, because remember they're exporting their cotton from the South to the Brits in England. So that's going to help. The lower tariffs are going to help the planters in the South. If you notice too, if you remember, Polk is from Tennessee. So of course he's going to do things that are going to help the Southerners at this point. He also restores an independent treasury in 1846, meaning that's when he vetoed the national bank, which made many people mad. He is in favor of acquiring California. And as a result, because of the bay, he wants the port at San Francisco, and the fact that there's all sorts of fertile land. You think about the land in Central California is very fertile. The weather is great. That's why they call it the fruits and vegetables that are grown even today in Central California feed like half of this country every day. In that one area in Fresno, near Sacramento, Modesto, California. So California was on his radar, and he wanted to settle the Oregon dispute, so they could have a treaty with the British in 1846. He went ahead and signed it with the Brits because of the Mexican-American War. So they get all of Texas, but only part of Oregon. Sorry. So in 1845, there were 13,000 Spanish Mexicans living there, 75,000 Indians in California, and 1,000 foreigners. That would be the Americans. Obviously, we were in the minority. So Polk goes to Mexico, who still owns California, and says, "Oh, let's buy it from you. Can we buy it from you?" But Mexico says, "No, no, 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 no. We're not. You ripped us off. You stole Texas." So they say, the United States says that Texas, owes $3 million to the United States as repayment for the destruction of American property. Mexico doesn't care, and they don't pay for it. So Polk sends John Slidell from Louisiana, as in Slidell, Louisiana is named after John Slidell, to offer Mexico $25 million for California. Mexico says, no, 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 not going to do that. So in January of 1846, Polk sends these troops down to the border and tries to make them mad so that they'll come after the United States, and then the United States can beat up on them, and it'll all be Mexico's fault because, of course, they were, quote unquote, the first aggressors. Polk asked Congress to declare war based on these unpaid debts once he gets the troops down to the border in Texas. he then goes and says, let's declare war on these people because they won't pay us back for the property that's been, it's been destroyed, American property. And because they wouldn't speak, they didn't go for Slidell's idea about paying $25 million for California. So he wants Mexico to be the first to fire. So April 1846, the Mexican troops cross into Texas. They fire on Zachary Taylor, who will be a president, of course. 16 Americans killed and wounded. And so you have this war, and then they secure California. So this Mexican cession after the Mexican-American War, they give Texas is secure, California is given to the United States. This idea of popular sovereignty is another doctrine that comes into being at this time, and it says that the people in a territory should be able to decide whether or not that territory is slave or free. So you'll hear the term popular sovereignty over and over, and it just means that it's up for a vote, that the Congress is not going to tell these people whether or not they have a free state or a slave state. So that way, this popular sovereignty idea says, okay, so this is 1846, 47-ish, and that way they cannot talk about slavery again. There are all these band-aids that were put on, Compromise of 1820, Missouri Compromise of 1820, sorry, the popular sovereignty, bringing in Missouri and Maine and all these different things. They were trying to put band-aids on this issue. So Zachary Taylor wins the election of 1848. We always, as I've said, we always elect our military people. So he wins the election of 1848, and which coincides with the discovery of gold at Sutter's Mill, California. Well, this totally blows up this slavery idea. Totally blows it up. So we'll talk about that in a minute. The people who gold is discovered, but it's not these massive amounts like we're in South America and in Central America. The people who really made the most money were the people who, quote unquote, mined, the miners. They charged outrageous prices for laundry and personal services, and then they moved on in 1851. They moved to Australia because gold was discovered there. So this was like a flash in the pan, so to speak. It was really quick, but that gold discovery makes all the difference for the state of what becomes the state of California. Attracts tens of thousands of people to California overnight, overwhelmed the territorial government that was there. You had really wild men who were coming, women who were prostitutes and were following the gold miners. You have all this crime that's going on, outcast from society. San Francisco is basically a ghost town because everybody goes north to Sutter's Mill to find their fortune. So you have this issues between, in these 8 years, 1848 to 1856, where they're trying to establish an adequate government. But the people in California were Zachary Taylor, the president, says, okay, you go ahead and draft your constitution, quick, in 1849. They said, send it to Congress, apply for admission as a state, because you got plenty of people there to qualify to be a state. This Constitution says no slavery, so we don't have an issue with that. You don't have to put it up for a vote, nothing. So all you have to do is, he's trying to railroad this statehood, California statehood, into Congress, get it passed as quick as possible. California is going to bypass the territorial stage, and they're going to. It keeps the Southern congressmen from trying to block it because it's going to go in as a free state. But the Southern congressmen are not aware enough of it yet to know what's going on. when they find out, obviously they get very disturbed because the balance of power in Congress is toppled because there's an extra free state in there there's not one to match up with it reduces the Southern influence in Congress. What's interesting about California is that Zachary Taylor, they didn't know at the time that there was not enough gold there to worry about it so much, but Zachary Taylor wanted that gold because he knew he could tax it. And so that was going to be a boon for the United States government. If there was gold out there and if there was a lot of it, then they were going to have lots and lots of tax money. It was going into the banks, and that was going to be a great thing. So they wanted to make sure that California was a state, not just a territory. Which leads us to this compromise of 1850, because the South was so upset about California being admitted as a free state. So they have all these issues with the territories, as well with Texas and New Mexico here. So you've got New Mexico territory here. And so there's this disputed land. So New Mexico is given over to New Mexico territory, and this becomes the state of Texas. Oklahoma doesn't look like it does today, but it is. It's just an Indian territory. Remember from the Trail of Tears in 1830s. The North also wins the abolition of the slave trade, but not of slavery in Washington, D.C. So there you can't buy and sell enslaved people anymore, but there are enslaved people still in Washington. The South gets the Mexican cession. It gets New Mexico and Utah, and there's no restriction on slavery, and that's up for popular sovereignty, meaning there'll be a vote about it. Texas, the admission of Texas, they get $10 million from the federal government as compensation for all of their destroyed property from the war, and the fugitive slave law is stricter than the one in 1793. So what we're going to do now is we will stop here, and we will pick this up on Monday in class on April the 10th. We'll talk about the fugitive slave law first.